Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We are so incredibly glad you're here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We've got a really fascinating topic to get into.
We really do.
Yeah.
Uh, Usually when we talk about organizational systems or, administrative roles or even managing a crisis, there's this underlying demand for, like, assembly line efficiency.
Right, that push for constant productivity.
Exactly. A problem comes down to the conveyor belt, you process it, you fix it, and you move it along to the next station. And that feels productive, right?
It does in a corporate setting, sure.
Yeah, but when you step into the world of safeguarding, where you are dealing with human vulnerability and trauma and pastoral care, that factory machinery suddenly feels, well, violently inappropriate.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're looking at a professional landscape that is just profoundly fragile.
It is,
Yeah.
because it is the absolute antithesis of an assembly line.
Right.
When you are dealing with a human being's raw truth, mechanical efficiency, it cannot be the primary goal.
No, it really can't.
If you treat a delicate situation like a broken widget that just needs a quick repair, you don't fix it. You usually crush it.
Wow, yeah. Which brings us to the radical reframe we are looking at today. We are exploring this brilliant source document titled Series 3, What a DSL Can Learn from a Museum Curator.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And the core mission of this deep dive is to explore this surprising analogy for professionals in safeguarding roles, like a designated safeguarding lead or a DSL.
Right.
It asks a surprisingly simple question. What happens when safeguarding professionals completely abandon that factory mindset and instead treat sensitive human information exactly like a priceless, fragile museum artifact?
What's fascinating here is how that physical analogy immediately shifts the psychological weight of the job.
Oh, totally. Because museum curators work with objects that, literally cannot be recreated or repaired if they're lost.
Exactly. And in safeguarding, you aren't holding a piece of ancient pottery or a historical manuscript.
Yeah.
You are holding a child's trust. You are holding a disclosure, a lived experience, a really delicate moment of profound vulnerability.
Yeah.
And the stakes are identical to a priceless artifact because once that moment is mishandled, it cannot be undone.
Okay, let's unpack this right out of the gate, because I have a bit of pushback.
Sure, go ahead.
On paper, a safeguarding lead is essentially, well, a highly trained problem solver.
Right.
They are hired to intervene.
That is the expectation. Yeah.
But a museum curator, at least in the popular imagination, just stands around guarding old items in a quiet room wearing white gloves.
Right. It seems like a total mismatch.
Yeah. How does putting on the white gloves help someone who is dealing with an active crisis?
I get that. It sounds passive. But it actually strikes right at the heart of how human beings process power and ownership during a trauma.
Okay, how so?
Think about a true artifact in a museum. The person wearing the white gloves knows they do not own the object.
Right, they didn't make it.
Exactly. It belongs to history. It belongs to specific communities, to lineages, to individuals. The curator is entirely aware that they are merely a temporary guardian.
Oh, I see.
They are passing through the artifact's timeline, not the other way around. This is what the source calls the curator principle.
So they don't have, an ego about ownership? They aren't trying to make the artifact theirs.
That is the crucial pivot right there. When a vulnerable person shares an experience of trauma, that information, that pain, strictly belongs to them.
Wow.
The trust they place in an adult is a gift that is given. It is never something a professional is entitled to assume they have.
Right.
So the source highlights this as a massive strategic reframe. The professional is the custodian of the story, not the owner. It is entirely about stewardship, not control.
That is a massive psychological shift because the compulsion to fix things in adults is just so incredibly strong.
Oh, it's our default setting.
Yeah.
Yep.
If I feel like I own your problem the second you hand it to me, I might just take it entirely out of your hands. I'll make a bunch of decisions without consulting you. I'll call 5 different people.
Yeah.
And try to solve it on my own timeline.
Which is often driven by the adult's own anxiety rather than the child's needs.
Right.
Adults hate the tension of unresolved trauma. So we rush to fix the problem to soothe ourselves.
Oh, wow. That's so true.
But think about the psychological mechanism at play for the victim here. When someone has experienced trauma, they have fundamentally had their power and control taken away from them.
Yeah.
If they finally work up the courage to disclose that trauma, and the adult immediately takes over, assumes ownership, and starts making unilateral decisions.
You are literally mimicking the dynamic of the original trauma.
Yeah.
You're taking their power away all over again.
You've hit the nail on the head. That is exactly why the fixer mentality backfires so dangerously.
Yeah.
It disempowers the person who just shared their vulnerability with you.
Yeah.
When you view yourself as an owner, you prioritize control. When you view yourself as a custodian, you prioritize stewardship.
Which is so different.
Completely. A curator wouldn't take a 16th century painting and suddenly decide to paint a new background on it just because they thought it solved a visual problem.
Right. That would be insane.
Exactly. They respect the original state of the piece. In safeguarding, recognizing that the story belongs to the individual ensures that their agency remains at the absolute center of the process.
Okay, that reframes the entire initial interaction for me.
Good.
So if I am a custodian and a student walks into my office and hands me this priceless artifact, this terrifying, vulnerable disclosure, what is my actual job in that first 30 seconds?
Well, custodianship would dictate that before you study the item, you have to ensure it doesn't break.
Right. So before I figure out what era it's from or what it means, my only job is to make sure I don't drop it.
A curator's absolute primary role, before anything else, is to prevent damage and maintain integrity.
Right.
Translated to human terms, that means your first responsibility when a student makes a disclosure is not to analyze the situation.
It's not.
No. It is not to cross-reference facts. It is simply to protect the student, preserve their dignity, and prevent further harm. The first responsibility is not to analyze, it is to protect.
Oh, I love that. So trying to immediately solve or analyze a raw disclosure is like grabbing a fragile Ming vase and sprinting down the hallway to show it to an expert.
Yes.
The rushed handling, the sprinting, the panic, that is exactly what causes it to slip from your hands and shatter.
That visual of sprinting down the hallway perfectly captures what goes wrong in the nervous system of a child during a bad intervention.
Oh, really?
Yeah, let's ground that metaphor in reality. When a child decides to disclose something horrific, their brain is in a hypervigilant state.
Right, they're terrified.
Exactly. They are scanning the adult for microexpressions of panic, doubt, or anger.
Wow.
If you react with a barrage of questions if you start sprinting, the child's nervous system clocks your panic. They realize you are overwhelmed by their truth.
And so they protect you, or they protect themselves by taking it back.
Exactly.
They say, never mind, I made it up, or it wasn't a big deal.
That is the vase shattering. Improper handling in a museum destroys value and erases history.
Right.
In safeguarding, interrogating a vulnerable person, instead of just receiving their story with calm, grounded care, breaks their trust. And what is far worse, you silence future disclosures.
Because they learned that handing an adult their vase means the adult's going to drop it.
Yes. So they just stop handing it to anyone, keeping the trauma hidden, which increases their ongoing harm.
Man, some mistakes in this field simply cannot be undone.
They really can't.
I mean, you can apologize, you can change your reporting protocols, you can take a training course, but that initial moment of trust is just gone forever.
Which is why the priority must always be preservation over analysis. You receive the disclosure. You ensure the immediate safety of the child.
Right.
You maintain absolute calm and respect. You carefully place the artifact on a stable surface before you do absolutely anything else.
Okay, so we didn't sprint down the hallway. The artifact is safely held. We received it with care.
Right. Step one is complete.
But a museum isn't just a storage locker. You can't just stand in the hallway holding a vase forever.
No, you can't.
Eventually, you have to understand what the artifact is, and you have to communicate its value to others. Which brings us to this really tricky concept from the text, the danger of the naked fact.
Yes.
Because context is everything, right?
It really is. An artifact preserved but misunderstood is useless. An artifact without context is essentially meaningless and sometimes entirely misleading.
Give me an example of that.
Imagine a museum team excavating a piece of carved pointed wood. That is the naked fact. It is a piece of carved wood.
Okay.
But what is it? Is it a child's toy? Is it a religious relic? Is it part of a lethal weapon?
Oh, I see.
If you just look at the naked fact, you might put a sacred object in the children's play exhibit, which is profoundly disrespectful and inaccurate.
A completely botched presentation.
Right.
So what does this all mean for how a DSL actually writes a report or passes this information along?
A safeguarding concern, stripped of its context, like cultural background or personal history, can lead to a dangerously inappropriate response from the system.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say a student throws a chair in a classroom. The naked fact is aggressive, destructive behavior.
Right.
If you just write that down, the system reads the label and processes that student as a disciplinary problem.
They get suspended, They get labeled a troublemaker, and that file follows them to the next teacher.
Exactly. But the context changes the entire nature of the artifact.
How so?
What if the context is that the student's family was suddenly evicted from their home the night before?
Oh, wow.
What if they have a known history of trauma where loud noises trigger a fight or flight response and the fire alarm just went off?
Right, that completely changes the picture.
Understanding the context is just as essential as the facts of the disclosure itself. Just as curators frame narratives and influence understanding through exhibits, a DSL's communication shapes perception and outcomes.
So the way I write the report, the words I choose to use, literally dictates how the next person in the chain views that human being.
Eh.
I am curating their narrative.
Yes. Your words influence decisions and affect long-term outcomes, much like an anchoring bias.
Right.
The first piece of information someone reads about a person anchors their entire future perception.
That is an overwhelming responsibility.
Right.
You are illuminating the artifact, but you have to be so careful not to cast your own shadow over it.
Exactly.
Which means using clear, factual language, avoiding your own personal biases, and refusing to use loaded adjectives. You can't write, the student was being manipulative.
You can't.
You have to write, the student requested to leave the room 3 times.
You are preserving the integrity of the record. You present the artifact, surrounded by its accurate context so that the systems designed to help can actually see what they are looking at.
All right, let's assume we have done that perfectly. We've preserved the artifact, we haven't rushed, we've contextualized it beautifully without injecting our own bias.
Yeah.
We've essentially built the perfect, most accurate museum exhibit. But here is where I have a major pushback on behalf of the listener.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if we build a beautiful exhibit, don't we want people to see it? In a school or an organization, the ultimate buzzword is transparency. The mantra is sharing is caring.
Right. People want to be kept in the loop.
Yeah. Shouldn't teachers and staff be totally in the loop? If a kid is struggling, shouldn't every single teacher in that building know so they can help?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of what a premier museum actually does, we see why sharing is caring is a highly dangerous operating model for trauma.
Really?
Yes. Think about the curator principle of controlled access. Not everyone handles every artifact.
Right.
Not everyone who works at a museum has the keys to the archival vault. The person running the gift shop, the security guard at the front desk, even other researchers, they are not allowed to just wander in and handle the most delicate manuscripts.
That makes sense.
Access is restricted strictly to the specialists who need to stabilize the item. In safeguarding, open access to sensitive information creates massive risk.
But I can hear the counter-argument from a well-meaning teacher right now.
What's the argument?
If I know a student is going through a horrific custody battle, I'll know to be nicer to them. I'll know why they didn't do their homework. Keeping me in the dark hurts the kid.
It is a natural desire to want to know, but we have to separate curiosity from necessity.
Right.
Let's look at the mechanics of what happens when that information is broadcast. First, the student did not consent for their deepest vulnerability to be the topic of conversation in the staff room.
And let's be honest, the staff room is the biggest gossip mill on earth. Rumors trade like currency in those spaces.
Which completely violates the dignity of the individual. Furthermore, when unqualified staff possess highly sensitive trauma information, they often unintentionally mishandle it.
How do they mishandle it?
They might treat the student with a hovering pity that strips them of their agency, or inadvertently bring up the trauma in a public setting, thinking they're being supportive.
Oh, like, hey, buddy, I heard about your dad's arrest. Take all the time you need on this test. And suddenly the whole math class knows.
Exactly. It's devastating. Being a custodian means you protect the privacy of the artifact just as fiercely as you protect its physical safety.
Right.
There is a massive difference between secrecy and confidentiality. Secrecy is designed to hide wrongdoing. Confidentiality is designed to protect dignity.
That is a great distinction.
Information must be managed carefully and restricted strictly to those who need to know.
To bring it back to the museum, you don't display a fragile, ancient manuscript in the brightly lit main lobby just so everyone can feel involved and see it.
No, the light will literally destroy the ink.
Exactly. You keep it in the climate-controlled vault, and you only let the restoration experts in to see it. It is entirely about protecting the asset, not satisfying the curiosity of the staff.
And setting those boundaries is one of the hardest parts of leadership because you will face pushback from colleagues who feel entitled to know. But the curator does not compromise the artifact for the sake of office politics.
Okay, we have built an incredible theoretical framework here.
Mhm.
The museum is pristine, the vaults are secure, the curators are respectful.
It sounds ideal.
It does, but here's where it gets really interesting. Because human beings are not ancient pottery. A vase just sits there in the vault.
Right.
But a vulnerable child has to walk out of your office, go to math class, navigate the playground, and then go home to a potentially dangerous environment. They move.
Yes, they do.
So we have to pivot from the theoretical framework to the messy, dynamic reality of human leadership.
And to be honest, the source document is very explicit about where the museum curator analogy breaks down.
Oh, it is.
Yes. What professionals must not take from this role is the idea of passive preservation. A curator's job is ultimately static. You put the object in a glass box, you control the humidity, and you don't let anyone touch it.
Right, but you can't put a teenager in a climate-controlled glass box.
No, you cannot. Safeguarding requires action. Situations with vulnerable people are highly dynamic, fluid, and often escalating.
Yeah.
Curators preserve static objects for long-term history. DSLs protect living, breathing people in immediate, ongoing situations. It requires active intervention.
Which means the role itself is a massive, almost impossible paradox.
It really is.
On one hand, you must possess the meticulous, gentle, patient, hyper-cautious care of an archival museum curator. But on the other hand, you have to combine that with the active, dynamic, decisive reflexes of a first responder.
It is an incredibly demanding dual mindset. You are moving at the speed of a crisis, but you must handle the information with the slowness of a curator.
Wow.
And that paradox is exactly what builds the ethical safeguarding culture mentioned in the text. When a leader can successfully navigate that tension, it shifts the entire organization's pastoral systems.
What does that shift actually look like for the people inside the building?
It manifests in a few distinct ways. First, ensuring safety and care-protecting student dignity becomes the baseline of how the organization operates.
Okay.
Second, when students realize their vulnerabilities are treated as priceless artifacts, they feel valued. That actually creates developmental pathways for personal growth.
Right, because they feel safe.
Exactly. And finally, it establishes exceptionally high ethical standards for the adults. It demands professionalism over gossip.
So it stops being a factory where problems are just processed and becomes a space where humanity is genuinely stewarded.
Yes. And the source poses a brilliant system-level question directly to you, the listener, about your own workplace.
Well, what is it?
When safeguarding information is shared in your system, is it treated with the care it deserves or handled too casually? Am I treating it as something routine or as something that cannot be replaced if mishandled?
That is the ultimate gut check. So to bring all of these threads together for you, the listener, we have completely dismantled the factory assembly line today.
We certainly have.
We've seen how shifting from seeing safeguarding as a bureaucratic checklist to viewing it as the sacred custodianship of irreplaceable trust stops us from hijacking someone else's trauma.
Right.
We explored the mechanics of why rushing to analyze a disclosure actually shatters trust, and why preservation has to come first. Information should never be handled casually or rushed.
Never.
We looked at how providing accurate context prevents a vulnerable person from being slapped with a permanent label. We unpacked why sharing is caring is toxic for trauma, and why locking the vault protects dignity.
Exactly.
And finally, we embrace the tension of being both a gentle curator and an active, decisive protector.
It is a profound discipline. It requires an awareness of the fragility of what we hold and the discipline to never let the pace of the environment dictate the care of the artifact.
Now, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over or explore on your own, building on the psychology we've unpacked today. We have talked entirely about formal safeguarding today, professional roles, institutional systems. But what if you applied this curator of trust mindset to every piece of personal friction or vulnerability a colleague, friend, or family member shares with you this week?
Oh, wow.
Think about a colleague venting to you, a friend confessing a fear, or a family member sharing an insecurity. If we viewed every moment of human vulnerability as a priceless artifact we don't own, but merely hold in trust, how would that completely alter the way we listen?
That changes everything.
It really does. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.